I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Across the Gridiron. I am Matt, and I am joined eventually again today by my friend and yours, Eddie. Eddie, I would ask you how you've been, but you've had a bit of a rough week, haven't you? That's hence why we're recording this on a Friday rather than our normal Monday.
Yes, I have. How are you, Matt? It's been a rough week. I have had all the flu symptoms, from a bad sore throat to cough, sinuses. It's been rough. So I'm just getting back into let's say I'm about 75%, but 75% is better than 100% of a lot of things. So.
Well, Eddie, to be honest, most people who be watching this knows that your 10% is better than my 100%. So let's. But yeah, again, to be fair, we did try and record on Monday as we normally do. You logged onto the call, and I said, Eddie, there is absolutely no way we could do this. You could barely speak. If you got to the end of the the AFC discussion, you would have been completely. Your voice would have been completely gone. So.
Yeah.
So
we needed to spare the whole world from having that on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely.
That could have been bad.
So we're now trying to fit this in between our boring professional lives,
yes.
family lives, and hence why we're getting this on a Friday. So look, what we normally do is we normally do a more of an in-depth review of the week before. Then we'll do our picks and our preview. But we're going to try and just merge everything in one today. So what we'll do is we'll just talk about each game that's coming up. Big, obviously, weekend. This is when the season's coming to an end. We've only got 2 more weekends of doing this, Eddie, when we've got matches to talk about. So
I know. How have we got here?
I know. Well, we'll preview the games. We'll talk a little bit about the games of how we got there. So yeah, completely, free balling this one, no script whatsoever. So we'll just dive straight into it because obviously normally when we do this, we're normally so slick and so professional, of course.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about the AFC. Let's start in the AFC. Championship game is going to be the Denver Broncos versus the New England Patriots, seed 1 versus seed 2. And this is shaping up to be a fascinating game in a way that I don't think anyone would have predicted. Just to recap how we got here, certainly on Denver's side, Denver played an incredibly close game against the Bills, winning out in overtime. But I think the biggest story of it, which was what had the news that came after the game, which is their starting quarterback, Bo Nix, has broke his ankle and he's out. So that means we've got new quarterback in, but we'll talk about that in a second. But Eddie, just quickly, that it's worth talking about the Bills Broncos game to start with because that game was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was incredible, and there was a lot riding on that game. Obviously, Josh Allen. This was it. This was it. This was that path to a Lombardi, right? No Lamar, no Patrick Mahomes, no Joe Burrow, no quarterback that has been there, done it. It was like, Josh Allen, it's your time. And I mean, you could see from his emotional press conference afterwards, how that really, really how it impacted him. But fair play to him because, he took full responsibility, for what happened in that game. Clearly, he can't afford to be throwing those kind of picks that he did in the game. And, all picks are not equal, but when you throw some picks at certain times of the game, it just demoralizes everybody else. It's like the defense have hardly sat down before they're like, hey, you got to go back in again.
Yeah, it really was. It really was a weekend of turnovers, wasn't it? I think last
Oh,
weekend it made such an impact to all the scores, and
that's
I mean,
it.
especially the other AFC game, which we'll come on to
Yeah,
soon. But it's just not
yeah.
what you expect. It's just not what you expect from Allen, is it? Really? But
No.
he has such a good game, I think. Apart from those two interceptions.
Apart from those two interceptions, and they came at the worst time. But you've got to say, these Broncos, they made business. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
defense, they are taking no prisoners. They are playing like their lives depend on it. They are playing as if they might never get back to the postseason. And maybe they might not, right? Because look, the NFL is such a brutal league that nobody's guaranteed to make it to the postseason. I mean, we always do this sort of, reflection, of the season and things like that. And we'll probably look at, teams that, we started at the start of the season were like, these are all playoff teams, and the ones that we thought had no chance. And of course, the NFL just completely rewrites that script and just says, hey, we've got something else in store. So, the Denver Broncos are playing this game like they should play it. But we're going to talk about what they have to deal with right now, because talk about, things stacking up against you. It couldn't be anything worse than losing your starting quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And that has Sean Payton, when he was talking about it, you could see the emotion, in his face and I don't even think I've seen Sean Payton, that emotional. I remember that that NFC was a championship game, the one that they had that, was it a pass interference or something a couple of years ago, and then they lost that game, and obviously they now came and then changed some of the rules and stuff like that on the back of that, and that this is even worse than that, the way he was sounding. And yeah, first of all, hope Bo Nix recovers, because knowing a quarterback like us, we had Dak Prescott, who had an injury to the leg. It takes a season and a half to kind of come back and be yourself, to like put that foot down, run on it when you get sacked, all the psychology, about the recovery. So there is a long road, for him, but maybe the Denver Broncos will get a Super Bowl to like help ease all of that.
Well, absolutely, and a lot's relying now on the backup quarterback, Jared Stidham, who he's been with the Broncos now for, I think this is his third season, but he hasn't thrown a pass in a game since 2023. Right?
Yeah.
He took 4 snaps last year; they were all rushing, and he's taken 1 kneel down this season.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a huge amount of pressure. Now, normally, when you have these sorts of games and you have these backup quarterbacks or a rookie quarterback, you say, look, you play with house money, just go out there, enjoy it. There's no pressure. There's pressure now. This is a hell of a game to come in. And this could be, we've seen it in the past where backup quarterbacks have come in at this late stage and have even won a Super Bowl. Hello, Nick Foles. But this is going to be a baptism of fire. But one thing I know, Sean Payton, he will love this situation. He will love the fact that he can go in with his guy who knows his playbook and actually go and win. So
yeah,
but he's up against a Patriots team, and let's move over to the Patriots now, because the Patriots beat the Houston Texans in their divisional game. They're against Mike Vrabel. These are two teams that are polar opposites in a way, because you've got Sean Payton's very offense led, Mike Vrabel very defensive led, and there's going to be a bit of a culture clash here. And what we saw last week is the New England Patriots defense, when they want to be, they can be a nasty defense, and they really, I mean,
they did a number on CJ Stroud.
CJ Stroud is going to be having nightmares. I mean, we talk about turnovers, but I mean, the Patriots won 28-16 in the end. But we talk about the Texans, how good their defense is, and how great their defense has been, and that their defense was able to keep them within like one score for a lot of this game, despite the fact that Stroud threw a pretty disastrous pick six. But the defense kept him in it. But then as soon as they've done well, all of a sudden another interception, another 3 and out, and they're back in. And CJ Stroud it was a bit of a nightmare for the young lad.
Honestly, he must have gone into the wrong jersey or the wrong locker room before heading out to the stadium, because somehow he was seeing different colors. He was so desperate to give the ball to the Patriots. It was like the Patriots are like, no, you have the ball. It's like, no, you're good. Have it back. It was like, it was crazy. And look, that Texan defense, they are absolutely relentless. They're like, okay, don't worry. You try an interception, we got your back. Let's get you the ball back. And then they got him the ball back, and he made, but in a way, though, I know that everyone is going to be piling on CJ Stroud, and there's a lot of people that are coming out and talking about how much he's regressed and and everything. But let's be honest, is this organization has very similar characteristics to the Dallas Cowboys, and I'll explain. So the Dallas Cowboys haven't been to an NFC championship in forever, right? They've had all kinds of quarterbacks, from Tony Romo to, Dak Prescott, and these are all good NFL quarterbacks, passing yards, touchdowns, and all of that. But the Cowboys never seem to go past the divisional round. And the Texans never seem to go past the divisional round as well. So this is now like, what are they, 0-7 in the last couple of times that they've been there? And it's not just CJ Stroud, it's other quarterbacks that have been there as well. So maybe there is something, about that particular team when it gets into that moment, right? Do they overthink it? Is there too much pressure that comes with not having gone past that everyone starts doing uncharacteristic things? CJ Stroud is not a bad quarterback, but you wouldn't know that from that game, right? If you turn the TV on and you were watching that game, you're like, is he a starting quarterback or should he be a backup quarterback? But maybe there is more to it, with the fact that the organization have just not been over the line for so long. And I think that means something, psychologically. It might be difficult to measure, but there is something there about always stopping at the exact same point every season.
Yeah, possibly, but I think in this case they just came up against a better team, and you go out and have an individual performance like that. And let's look, he had he threw 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions, and had a rating of 28, right? Where if you compare that to say Drake May, and I don't think Drake May, I don't think did anything particularly special in this.
Just don't throw the ball away.
Yeah, obviously he threw. Well, he 1 interception. He threw 3 touchdowns, but 179 yards, but he had a rating of 100. Now, when you've got 2 good defenses, you've got 1 quarterback with a 28 rating, 1 with 100. That's where the difference lies. But yeah, okay. But look, this is where we are. Then we've got Denver, we've got New York, 2 of the top 2 seeds in the AFC meet in the championship game. And I mean, who would have seen this coming at the beginning of the season? But how do you see this game going then?
Listen, I do hold this view that when it comes to games like this, you cannot have a passenger at all in any department, right? No. Offense, special teams, defense, coaching, even the people that are sitting on the booth, everyone has to be on point. Now, I think, there's a lot of comparisons about Nick Foles and the Eagles. But let's remember that the Eagles had some weapons, right? in their offense, right? They had some legitimate players there. So it wasn't like as if the focus was on Nick Foles necessarily, right? Clearly he stepped in, and it probably helped that he stepped in before the actual beginning of the playoffs, right? So you're able to get into rhythm. You're able to understand your players, and he has come in for a couple of games, before then, because I think Carson Wentz got injured. Maybe was it the 10th game or the 11th game of the season? Because I remember he was was it 10-1 or something like that in the MVP conversation? Then he had that injury, and then Nick Foles came in. And I remember that injury, they were doing some kind of quarterback sneak. And he was trying to get on the pile and all of that, and that injury happened with Carson Wentz, and then Nick Foles came in. So I felt like he had a bit more time to adjust to the team and in game condition. Stidham has got no time whatsoever. He's got to go to the biggest game, of the Denver Broncos in recent history and his life, and go and beat the Patriots. I just think that there is a bridge too far. I mean, with all respect to Sean Payton, he's been there and done that, and that defense is serious. But the defense of the Patriots are no joke. And when you play the Houston Texans, who are supposedly the number one defense, at the time before that game, I just think that everything is swinging towards the Patriots side of things. And it just feels like, Tom Brady all over again, where, the things just drop in the Patriots' favor, all this, whether it's decisions, whether it's just, just some spooky things, just happen, when the Patriots get into the postseason. I think it's happened again. I think the Patriots do this. I just, as much as I would want to get that fairy tale story of, Stidham going in there and riding into the sunset with a win over the Patriots, I just can't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard quite a few people in various podcasts still actually going with Denver.
Yeah.
Because Denver have been great this season for the most part, but yeah, I mean, Bo Nix hasn't had a massive sort of lights out season. He's not in the MVP conversation the way that obviously Drake May is. So the argument could be, well, in theory, you could maybe swap him out for another quarterback, and Denver could still operate as well as other teams. So it's not like losing a Mahomes or an Allen, or I don't think it would be bad as when, for example, the Bengals lost their quarterback earlier this season when they lost Burrows, and how disastrous that was for them for a few weeks. So I think they could still. I still think this will be competitive. However, that being said, I just think this has got Patriots' name on it now. So I'm like you. I'm going for Patriots with this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the only thing I think is worth saying on the AFC before we move over is if we just rewind a little bit, go back to Buffalo, because one of the other biggest the casualties of that game, as well as Bo Nix, was the Buffalo Bills head coach. So they've decided to sack their head coach, McDermott. I've forgotten his first name now. Sean McDermott.
Sean
McDermott, who has been there for a long time. And this one came out of the blue. When for example, when Harbaugh left the Ravens, there was lots of talk about him falling out with Lamar Jackson, and despite them being really successful together, there seemed to be some tension. So Harbaugh leaving wasn't really a shock to many people, but this one did seem to come out of left field, and we're going into a situation now where in the AFC there's going to be no McDermott, no Harbaugh, and then no Tomlin. Yeah. Who would have thought that? At their respective clubs. I mean, what did you make to that? Do you think this is just a case of them saying, right, we just need somebody else to give Allen a chance of getting to the Super Bowl?
It's all about Allen, right? I think that at some point as an organization, you stare at your championship window in the face. And everybody talks about the window that is either open or closed, right?
Mhm.
And Josh Allen is no second string quarterback. He's no like second year or third year, fourth year. He's been in the league for quite a while now. And, at some point, it gets harder and harder. I think there are some stats that if you don't get to the Super Bowl in like the first 7 years, of being a quarterback, and I may be wrong on the specific years, but I think the stat was highlighting that it gets harder and harder, for quarterbacks who haven't gone there in their first 5 years to actually make it there. So the longer it takes for Allen to get there, I think the organization starts to think, well, am I doing everything enough to take advantage, of Josh Allen and the talent that he is? And they've fired, coordinators in the past, they've gotten rid of players, they've brought in new players, and it just seems like they can't get over the hump, especially in a season where there is no Patrick Mahomes, because I think sometimes it's easier to swallow when you know that the other team is very, very good. Like you go and you play in our football, let's say you're, in Manchester United, or Arsenal, and you go to Chelsea, and you go to Man City, and let's say you lose, right, that game. But then Man City or Chelsea eventually win the title, you kind of feel this comfort, like, okay, we lost to the champions, right? So it doesn't, you almost kind of feel like, well, yes. But if you go lose to, no disrespect to any of these teams like the West Brom or West Ham, or any of those things, you're beginning to kind of think, okay, do I have the right players? Do I have the right coach? You start to ask all of those questions. And I think, the Bills, have just gotten to that point where they would have thought they had the better team. They would have thought they had a better quarterback. They would have thought, they had a chance to get to the Super Bowl. So when you lose, everyone is asking questions. And usually it always goes down to the coach or the GM. Now, I think they've kept the GM and maybe even given him a promotion or something like that.
They have, yeah,
so,
yeah.
so that's kind of, telling you what's going on, where they're clearly, putting the blame on. But yeah, it was bound to happen at some point. But I don't think anybody expected it to happen this season.
No. But look, it'll be interesting to see. See what happens. As you said, it's all changed in the AFC for next season, so it should be quite exciting. You never know. Miami Dolphins might even. No, actually, no. Let's not go too far. Let's not go too far.
Haven't you guys got a new coach?
Yeah, we do, but yeah, the time's too short. See, I'm not like you, Eddie. I don't need to force the Miami Dolphins into every conversation. Like you managed to. I asked you a question about Houston Texans. He said, "Well, it reminds me a lot of Dallas Cowboys." Where the hell did that come from? We didn't. No one was inviting a question about the Dallas Cowboys, but still, I admire your persistence. But anyway, clown. Speaking of Dallas Cowboys, let's look at the NFC. And yeah, the NFC game is going to be the Seattle Seahawks, who comprehensively swatted aside the 49ers. Versus the LA Rams, who had a much tighter game against the Chicago Bears. But so look, let's start with that one, because that was really another fantastic game.
Yeah,
with interceptions sort of making, again, being a key factor in this game. Won in overtime with a field goal after an interception that Williams threw, but beyond that, I thought Williams was great. But yeah, how did you see this game? Because again, it was such a back and forth game for so it was so close. Could have gone either way in the end.
Yeah. I love the game. As a neutral, this was probably, the game that you would have probably loved to watch. I mean, all the other games had their elements. The Seattle one was a blowout, so at some point you probably tuned off, like, okay, this is going one way. But this one, you genuinely did not know who was going to win it. Was it going to be Caleb Williams who was going to, do his fourth quarter magic? Was it going to be Matt Stafford who's going to win the MVP? Now, I mean, the fact that he's gone to the NFC Championship, I think that nails it. He's winning the MVP this season. And if there's anything like moral victories, this was a moral victory for Caleb Williams and the Bears, right? They've gotten more than they ever thought they will get. And I think sometimes, life can, in the moment, you feel so much pain and regret because you're kind of thinking, one more game, I could have been in the Super Bowl. But sometimes you have to take a step back and just consider where you were last season, right? How many wins did Chicago Bears have last season? To even be thinking about, making a deep run in the playoffs. And I know, you can say, well, as an athlete, you always want to go there and win, but there's also growth. There's also progression, for players, for teams, just figuring out the know-how and the logistics of playoffs, travel, training, prep time, sleep time, relaxation, recuperation, all of those things behind the scenes, you need to figure it out. Now, those things are not, usually very evident, but, a lot of insiders come from watching, things like the Amazon Prime show, about, teams, whether it would be Arsenal, whether it would be Spurs or whatever, any of those teams that they follow. You start to see the behind the scenes, all the things that work, in order to build that championship team. Is never just what's on the page. So from a Chicago Bears perspective, they've started building foundations. Ben Johnson coming in, right? He's now coming. He's got, basically he's had a season where he started to figure out how to use his quarterback the best. And that is the key, right? Because everybody talks about it. If you've got a good quarterback, you can go far, right? And sometimes you don't know if you've got a good quarterback if you don't have the right structures in place, to actually help that quarterback to progress. You look at the likes of Sam Darnold, right? You see what he's doing now in Seattle, right? So you start to wonder, what the heck was going on when he was in the Jets and seeing ghosts, when he was playing, right? So the Bears are in a very good position right now. I think if I'm a Bears fan, I'll be quietly optimistic because now I'm thinking to myself, we might have the makings of a team that will be competitive now. Season, it's not a guarantee that they're going to go win the Super Bowl, next season, but you now know that the coach is good. You look at the quality of wins that they've had this season. You've seen your quarterback in some interesting situations, right? Coming, fourth quarter wins. People talk about fourth quarter comebacks. It's always like the hallmark, throwing touchdowns, running for touchdown, playing, well, getting into the postseason, going far into the postseason. So I think the Bears should be quietly optimistic. And now you talk about the Rams, right? The Rams.
Yeah, so I just want to touch on that. I think the one thing that you mentioned about the Bears, it's just worth highlighting before we go on to the Rams, is that you're right. I think the one thing that Chicago should be covered, they have their quarterback now. They've spent years looking for a quarterback to be their franchise quarterback, and Chicago fans, you've now got him. I thought Caleb Williams throughout this season you could just see that progression week in, week out. And there'll be games and there'll be times like he did last weekend where he'll throw some interceptions, which makes you question. But sorry, was it that last touchdown in regular time where I think it was like 10 yards or 20 yards out? But then by the time he threw it, he was about 50 yards away from the goal line. Yeah. He was moving around so much, and to actually pick out the receiver, it was so long ago, I can't remember who it was, as an absolutely insane play. So now I think I think Bears fans probably need to be a bit more than quietly optimistic, because I think I still think there's potential a lot of churn in the NFC next year. I think Chicago have, they've got themselves a great foundation to progress. But you're right. We don't want to spend too much time on this today. We're trying to make this a bit of a shorter episode. So let's talk about the Rams. How do you think they're shaping up?
I think the Rams have got everything now. I think the Rams have got everything. It's playing a division rival is very difficult, right? So they've locked horns. It's funny, lock horns, because the Rams and horns. See, I didn't even try. I just kind of like it. Just so bad. So with the Seattle Seahawks, and it's kind of been one way or the other. I think they shared the wins this season. So this is the big one, right? This is for all the marbles. And on one hand, on one side of the heavyweight, you've got Sam Darnold, right, who is just doing ridiculous stuff, and that offense looking like how they used to talk about it, the Harlem Globetrotters, in terms of scoring points and like taking care of people stylistically as well. So you've got that going on, but then you've got the Rams. You almost have Professor X, like Sean McVay, almost like scheming things, to try and get the Rams over the line. I don't know why I kind of favor the Rams in this one. Although you remember when I said to you that imagine the Super Bowl would be the Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl. I don't think the NFL wants that. I think the Patriots and the Rams, kind of feels like a Super Bowl that you want to watch, as well. I think I'm going to go with Sean McVay, the coach, edge, the soon to become MVP, Stafford, and just experience of getting to that Super Bowl. And yeah, I know the Seahawks have done it with the Legion of Boom and all of that, but I want to lean towards the Rams in this one.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to go for the Rams. Well, I just think the Rams have more weapons, to be honest. They can score quickly. They don't need to sustain drives. I just think that, look, Sam Darnold's had a great season. The Seahawks have been great again. Mean looking defense. I'm just going for the quality of the players, and I think that the LA and the Rams just probably have more weapons. I think that can do Seattle damage. But look, let's touch on Seattle a little bit. As I said, we're not going to touch too much on that game because obviously we didn't want to do a big review. They just walked all over the 49ers in the end. But we said that was going to happen. They were just the 49ers was just too banged up. But at the end of the day, Seattle got the job done. I mean, could you make a case for Seattle to win this?
Listen, I could certainly make a case that they have taken a lot of quality opponents this season, right? And people can kind of look at the schedule and say, oh, maybe it wasn't the strongest schedule of all. But you don't get to the postseason without having something. And Seattle have something. They can score. You might not know all the players in their offense, but they do play as a team, right? And they've got a quarterback that is capable of showing up in consistent form, right? Sam Darnold is capable of throwing the picks here and there, and he's done that. But he's also capable of playing a clean game. And a clean game might actually mean Sam Darnold doing not lots in the game, as well. So they've got multiple ways to win the Seattle Seahawks. So yes, there is a part. And their defense is decent. They do take the ball away too as well. So you can see, maybe the Seattle Seahawks defense get a touchdown, from a pick, which is certainly possible. If the special teams, score You know, it is sometimes these things can be like special teams can score, defense can score. Next thing you know, you're 14 up, and the offense have hardly been on the field. So all of that can happen. So yes, there is a case to be made, but yeah, I'm not making it.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that although the Rams have obviously they've got to the championship game, they haven't been playing anywhere near. I mean, a few weeks ago, we both had them as our favorites for the favorites to get to the Super Bowl. It's because they were almost blowing teams away. But it was Seattle who were the top seed, right in the end. And I think were LA 5th or 7th in the end? I can't remember. I think they were 5th, weren't they?
Yeah, they were 5th. They were 5th, although they were 5th because they're in the same division. To be fair,
well, yes, they had absolutely.
A good record.
No, absolutely, but they had a few, but they stopped winning convincingly. They had a few games where they looked unstoppable at some point, and now they're scraping wins. But so they haven't been the juggernaut that they were a few weeks ago. But look, I'm like you, and I think we can agree then that the Across the Gridiron pick for the Super Bowl will be the Patriots and the Rams. All right, then. Look, let's leave it there, Eddie. You're currently in your hotel room. You need to get out of your hotel room and get on a train home. So I will let you do that. I need to go pick my daughter up from whatever after school club she's doing. But yeah, looks like a really exciting weekend in as planned again. So Eddie, look forward to catching up with you on that next week. But for now, as always, take us home.
Yeah, so this is it, guys. 2 more weekends, 2 more games, and then we'll be getting the confetti down. Listen, I do appreciate everybody that watches this channel. So don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as well. And more importantly, join into the conversation as well. Maybe even put in the comments, some of the things that you like us to talk about, during the off season. It'd be good to, hear from you guys. What should we go over? We've got some ideas, but it'd be good to hear from you guys as well. So drop that in the comments, and we'll look forward to reading them as well. And but until then, let's enjoy what would be an amazing NFL championship weekend, and let's see who's going to put that smack down, on someone this weekend. But until next one, we'll see you across the gridiron.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the